1 Samuel chapter 30 verse 6 says, "And David was greatly distressed, for the people spoke of stoning him, because all the people were bitter in soul, each for his sons and daughters. But David strengthened himself in the Lord his God." Bob Russell, in his book Extreme Faith, Tapping God's Power, wrote about a father who watched through the kitchen window as his small son attempted to lift a large stone out of his sandbox. The boy was frustrated as he wrestled with the heavy object because he just couldn't get enough leverage to lift it over the side. Finally, the boy gave up and sat down dejectedly on the edge of the sandbox with his head in his hands. The father went outside and asked, "What's wrong, my dear son? Can't you lift that rock out?" "No, Dad, I am not able to do so," said the boy. The dad asked him, "Have you used all the strength that's available to you?" And the boy replied, "Yes, Dad. All the strength that's available to me, I have used it." And the father said, "I don't think so. You haven't used all the strength that's available to you. You haven't asked me to help you." David, we see, found himself in a real mess. While he and his men were away from home, their enemies, the Amalekites, raided Ziklag, the town where David and his men were living. The Amalekites burned the town to the ground and took the women and children captive. When the men returned, they were beside themselves with grief, having lost everything. They cried until they were completely emptied of tears. David, who shared in their loss and pain, had an added hurt to deal with as his men turned on him, blaming him for his tragedy. In their grief, they spoke of stoning David. Overwhelmed by trouble, emotionally bankrupt, physically exhausted, depressed, stressed, and fearing for his life, David saw things go from bad to worse. When things go from bad to worse in our lives, we can either allow despair to overcome us, or we can determine to overcome obstacles God's way. Notice what David did. He strengthened himself in the Lord. Practically, this means to start by taking our eyes off our trouble and putting them on God. Sometimes in life, things go from bad to worse. Do not wait for someone to come along to help us out of our situation, because we may be waiting a long time. Instead, let us turn to the Lord, strengthen ourselves in Him, and walk through the valley of despair to His fields of strength. Take up the challenge. When life goes bad to worse, turn to the Lord.